the darkness that we get to the greatest light. This seems to be a truth in life, and it seems to be a truth that Kabbalah also discusses, which we'll explore today as we get to our topic, original darkness. But it's something also that I think we see in many different areas, not only in our own lives, but also in, let's say, in practice, in Jewish practice. So for example, I'm holding right here, you like how I pulled out that prop quickly. So holding here a shofar. And when we blow the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, which I may have mentioned before a moment ago, is less than 3 weeks away. Actually, 3 weeks from today is when we will sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Because, as you may know, we don't blow the shofar on Shabbat. So Rosh Hashanah, when it falls out on Shabbat, we do not sound the shofar. So this year, Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbat and then Sunday. So we're not going to blow the shofar on Shabbat, but the second day Rosh Hashanah, which is Sunday, we're going to blow the shofar. That's 3 weeks from today. So 3 weeks from today, we're going to have a shofar and... Right? Hate to toot my own horn, but nonetheless, I'm kidding. So this is the shofar. And when we blow I'm here all week. And when we blow the shofar, right? So there's a special prayer that is recited. And it comes from the book of Psalms, and there are different prayers. There's a blessing, and there are prayers. And one of the Psalms that's recited, begins with the words, Min ha-meitzar karasi ka anani v'merchav ka. I'll say it again. Min ha-meitzar, I'll translate. From the narrow spaces, karasi ka, I call out to God. Anani, answer me. B'merchav, with abundance, ka, God. In other words, God, I call out to you from a place of constraint. Answer me from a place of abundance. Now, on a simple level, that means that we call out to God when we have challenges. In Yiddish, what do we call them? What's the word for challenges that we use in Yiddish?
Surus.
Surus, right. Exactly. That's min ha-meitzar. Tsar. The idea of a narrow space. When we're in a space of challenge, of trouble, we call out to God. And our hope is that God should answer us with the blessings that we need, with the abundance, whatever it is, whether it's financial, whether it's health, whether it's family, whether it's nachas, whatever blessings we need, we hope that they're answered in abundance. The mystics tell us, the Kabbalists share, that this idea is treated, or this is encapsulated in the shofar. Because look at the shofar. Look at the end. Look at one end. This is the narrow end. Hey Robert, good to see you. This is a narrow end. And this is the wider end, correct? Yes? Narrow, wider. Feel like an episode of Sesame Street. Narrow, wider. Right? So this is the narrow end, the wider end. So we expel, we project sound through the narrow end, and out comes a loud blast. Again, just to demonstrate. Right? And Max and Joy, I know you guys have a rock and a big shofar over there. Pull it out. Let's everyone see it. I mean, I don't want to send you on an errand here, but why not? They have a nice looking shofar. Look, the call, if you will, comes out through the wider end. This is symbolic. This is evocative of the idea of min ha-meitzar. There we go. Nice. If y'all can see that screen of Max and Joy, that's a nice shofar right there. Yeah. So look at the end. One end is narrow, one end is wide. Every shofar is going to have the same construct, right? Every shofar is going to have the same construct. And you might say every instrument has the same construct, right? If you're sounding the trumpet, if you are playing the bugle, if you're playing a flute, right? It all works the same way. Whether it's a wind instrument, whether it's a what's the other form? David, help me out here. What am I missing? What are the terminologies? Whatever. If you're playing an instrument, you're typically forcing sound through a... What is it?
It doesn't work for strings. Maybe.
Well, listen. We'll have to leave strings for string theory. That's another class, and that's going to be another quantum leap in Kabbalah. But here's the point. Most instruments the wind instruments, right, are working the same way. You're forcing air through a narrow space, and that produces a sound that emerges from a wider space. Again, min hametzar, from the narrow space, karasi ka, I call out to God, anani, please answer me, bamercha, from the wide space, God. So we ask God that we should, our prayers emerge from a space of constriction, from a place of not having or needing, from a place of pain, of challenge, of darkness. And we ask the God answer us with abundance, with relief, with all the blessings that we need, so we can breathe easier. This happens to be the way in which the world works. Necessity is the mother of invention. The greatest breakthroughs have typically occurred after there's been a problem that needed to be solved. And a problem means that there's something that's a tight space, a challenge. You don't know how to solve it until you do. So what we see here is a pattern. What's the pattern? In the language of Kabbalah, the pattern is first darkness and then light. The truth is, this is not something that the Kabbalists originate. This is something that comes from the Torah from the beginning, quite literally the beginning. And I have my trusty Chumash next to me, Chumash Ai, 5 books of Moses, and I'll do this. I'm going to open up randomly to page 1. Actually, here is page 2. I don't know, what a Jewish thing to start with page 2. Anyway, page 2, Genesis 1:1. By the way, I'm not joking when I say such a Jewish thing to start on page 2. The Talmud, for those of you that have studied Talmud, the Talmud always begins on Daf Bet, on page number 2. That's it. It always begins on page 2. They say, the typesetter was getting paid by the page, so you count the title page as a page because you gotta get paid for the page count. I'm joking. That's cynical. But Torah also begins with the letter Bet, which is the sign that we're not number 1. I know in college football everyone loves the foam fingers. We're number 1. Whatever. But that's a different thing. But when it comes to life, right? We recognize that we are 2. There's something else above us. But let's get back to the beginning. So the Torah says, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The earth was astoundingly desolate. Darkness was on the surface of the deep. And God's glory hovered over the water. God said, let there be light, and there was light. So if you had to describe the origins of creation, the Torah does a very good job in depicting it. The Torah says, what did it look like? It was dark and desolate. And then God said, Yehi ar, let there be light, and there was light. And then the Torah says that God saw that the light was good. God separated between the light and the darkness. He called the light day, the darkness night. It was evening and it was morning, day number 1. That, in summary, are the first 5 verses of the Torah. Very beautiful, very poetic. But what does it mean for us? The Torah here is charting a system. The Torah is charting a reality that you and I inhabit. And that is that in our own lives, as in the process of creation in our own lives, first comes darkness, then comes light. That is the necessary, it pretty much is the necessary progression of life itself. First darkness and then light. And if you don't believe me, I'll ask you the simple question. How did you start? How did you start? Yeah? Think about it. 9 months of gestation. Yes? And then, the bright lights. First darkness, then light. First concealment, then revelation. That is the system that every single one of us, that's the process that every single one of us followed in our own lives. It's not a it's a necessary process. We were all there. And even after we're born, the same process repeats itself. We have questions and then we get answers. We have challenges and then we have relief. We have tension and we have resolution. We have struggles and then we have breakthroughs, hopefully, right? We have the narrow spaces and then followed by the wider spaces. First the narrow. In Jewish time, the evening precedes the day. And you saw that as I read to you the opening 5 verses of the book of Genesis. It says, Vayi Erev, Vayi Boker Yom Echad. Day 1 is comprised of an evening and the morning. That's how it works. First night, then day, and that's one day. So, unlike the secular calendar, where the new day begins after midnight or whatever it is, but, kind of the day begins, usually people think about the day beginning in the morning. In Jewish law, the day begins at sunset the night before. All right, sunset. So that's why Shabbat begins, of course, sunset on Friday. Friday, why should Shabbat begin on Friday? Rosh Hashanah is going to begin on a Friday night. Friday night, wait till the next morning. Call it a day. Saturday morning, Rosh Hashanah begins. No, that's not how it works. Vayi Erev Vayi Boker Yom Echad. The system of a day begins first with the darkness, the full darkness. Not like midnight, not some whatever, it's we're halfway there. No. It starts from the full measure, the onset of darkness. That's when a day begins. The day begins when the darkness begins. And what's the pattern? First, Bereisha Chashecha, first darkness, Vahadar Nahora, and then light. I'm quoting to you what the Talmud says in Tractate Shabbat, page 77b. Bereisha Chashecha, Vahadar Nahora. First darkness, it's Aramaic. First darkness and then light. That is the pattern of the universe. It's not just the cosmological pattern of the universe. It's not just the way we count time, but it's also the pattern of our own lives. In our own lives, we have the challenges followed by the breakthroughs. We have the questions followed by the answers. Sometimes we ask, why is it that life is so difficult? Why isn't it a thing that life could be a little bit more calm, a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more pleasant all the way around? Why can't we just live? Look, God can pull off anything, right? I mean, we believe that God is all-powerful, omnipotent. God could do anything. God is all-knowing. God is omniscient. So what if God knows what we need? If God knows how to make it happen, right? And God knows what we need better than we know what we need. So if that's the case, so why doesn't God just make it happen? No, give us all the blessings. Why make it difficult? Why do we have to go to work for a living? Why do we have to struggle? Why do we have to work hard? Why do we have to earn money? Why all of this stuff? For that matter, why do we have to sleep at night? Right? Why not just give us being awake and consciousness and full on and 100% productivity and excitement, or not even productivity? Why not just relax and enjoy and have all the blessings come to us? So the short of it is, there's really two ideas. Number one, we follow the pattern of creation. It all comes from the beginning. And the way God created the universe, the way God created life itself, first darkness and then light. If you want to get to a breakthrough, if you want to get to something magnificent, you and I will have to tread through, you and I will have to go through first the challenge. We're going to have to go through the dead ends. We're going to have to go through the difficulties. We're going to have to go through the hardship and the struggles. And it's going to be, and sometimes it won't seem like there's any hope. God forbid. It'll seem completely dark. But if we keep on pushing, that's when we get to the breakthrough. That is the pattern of life that God created. But the question still is why? If God could do anything, God could create another reality. So here's where the Kabbalists come in. The Kabbalists give us a rationale for understanding why this process. That the process is, all we need to do is look at the Torah. All we need to look at is the modality, the way God created the world. Is first darkness, then light. But the question is still why. God could have created any other system. God could have created a system where there's only light. Why first darkness and then light? And there are many answers for this, by the way. Some say, well, you can't appreciate the light without the darkness. You ever heard that answer? Yeah? So why the darkness then the light? Because if you just had light, you would never know that it's light. You might think it's darkness. I mean, you wouldn't know what to base it against. So the contrast provides you For somebody going through challenge, though, I don't know if that's any solace. Then we say, well, at the end of it, you're going to really appreciate it. Thank you very much. It doesn't feel comfortable right now. I don't know if I like that. So you're telling me that later on it's going to... There are many answers given. Many answers given, and many answers given in Kabbalah. I want to share with you a powerful perspective. Again, let's reset this very clearly. What are we trying to understand? The simple equation of pain equals gain, or challenge yields opportunity, or darkness begets and births the greatest light. Why? Why? Because that's the way it works. Why? Because God created it like that. Why? Because there's greater light from the darkness. Fine. But why? God could have created a system where there's greater light without the darkness. Are you with me on that? God could have created any system. The fact that you and I only appreciate light and with the backdrop of darkness is just because that's how we were created. But theoretically, you create another construct where we would appreciate the light in and of itself. So even that answer falls a little bit short in explaining the ultimate question, which is, why did God create this from the beginning in such a way? So one of the strongest answers or approaches given in Kabbalah is the approach we're going to take today. And that goes back to what I'm calling original darkness. Have you ever heard of the doctrine of original sin? Original sin? It's not a Jewish thing. So we're not going to talk about original sin. But what we are going to talk about is original darkness. The original darkness is the original darkness that exists at the beginning of creation that we just read about from Genesis. That in the beginning, the world was dark and it was desolate, and there was darkness covering the face of the earth. And then God said, let there be light, and there was light. What is the original darkness and why? Don't tell me, well, in the beginning there was darkness, then light, and that's the pattern that we follow. Why? Why was there darkness originally? Why the original darkness? That's our question for today. It's a powerful question. We're going to see today that there's incredible beauty in the darkness, and that the darkness exists for a completely different purpose. All of that coming up today on Kabbalah and Coffee as we explore original darkness. But first, let me check in with you all. Just make sure that everyone's on the same page. Everyone on the same page? Any questions, comments thus far? Good? All right. Robert, I'm loving the Kiddush cup. Are you kidding me? Love that. Love it. Even if it's not a Kiddush cup, it looks like a Kiddush cup. Oh, you got the whole Shabbat kit over there. Forget about it. It's fantastic. Look at that. Love it. Listen, it's never too early. It's never too early to get ready for Shabbat. By the way, I will mention this. Speaking of Shabbat, just very quickly. You know, every single day in our prayers, we sing a song that was sung, or we say the words of a song that was sung in the temple. Every single day a different song was sung during the service in the temple, in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And every day we say, Hayom Yom, no, Hayom, why are the words escape me? We say today is Rishon l'Shabbat. Today is the first day of Shabbat, second day of Shabbat, third day of Shabbat, which means that we count every day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, as day 1, day 2, day 3, toward Shabbat. So every day we're living with Shabbat. All right, let's get back to Kabbalah. Let's get back to darkness. O-G-D. No. O-G, darkness. Original, all right, original darkness. So what is original darkness and why original darkness? Here's the premise. And it's a premise that we've discussed before, but it's very important. When you're dealing with something truly infinite, then infinite shatters something that's very big will struggle to fit into a small space. So a light that's truly blinding, right, will blind an eye that is of a sensitive nature. That's why we know as human beings, we know not to subject the human eye to various strong light that could damage the eye, right? That's not a wise move. So you go outside and it's bright outside, and let's say your pupils are dilated, maybe you had an eye test or something, So what do? Help me out here. Unmute yourself if you can tell me the very scientific thing that you do if you walk outside and your pupils are dilated. Help me out. What are you doing?
You use dark glasses.
Yes, you use dark glasses. You wear sunglasses, right? What's a sunglass? Now we're segueing into the Kabbalah of sunglasses. What are sunglasses? Sunglasses necessarily are cutting the light so that the human eye can receive it, with the understanding that if you don't cut it first, it's going to be too powerful for the eye to maintain, for the eye to receive. Which means that sometimes it is possible to have too much of a good thing. Light is great. Everyone wants the light. But too much light can actually not only not be good, it can damage the potential recipient. Another example, when it comes to wisdom, and this is an example that we've talked about many times before, when it comes to ideas, when it comes to brilliant ideas. So if a teacher has wisdom that's too deep for a student, that's too brilliant for the student, what's going to happen? The student will not get the idea. On the contrary, it might go over the student's head, and it might confuse the student even more than had the teacher not taught it in the first place. Correct? Yes? My hope is that I'm not mirroring this right now in Kabbalah Coffee. Right? That's my hope. Right? So, but sometimes it could happen. It's possible that a teaching, that a concept could be so high for the student that it'll go, quote, over the student's head, and not only not enter, but end up confusing the student, and the student will walk out saying, with the misunderstanding of the concept, and or misunderstanding of life itself, even if it's deeper than that, and walk away with confusion and lack of clarity. This is possible when the light is too big for the container. So in general, we try to fit what we call R in Kabbalah, R and Keli, light and vessel. When light and vessel match, it's a good shidduch, it's a good match. When the light is too big for the vessel, that's what we call shavirat hakelim, the shattering of the vessels. That's not a good state. That's a state in which there's damage done. It's like the eye subjected, God forbid, to a very powerful blinding light. It could, God forbid, actually blind the eye. And not only so light is good, right? The eye needs light to see. But too much light, you can't have too much of a good thing. It can actually cause darkness to the eye as opposed to light. The truth is, even if it's not to the case, God forbid, of blinding, but if you hold like a candle or source of light very close to the eye, it actually shuts off the vision. The vision actually goes dark. With the more light, the more dark. It seems like a paradox, but it's the truth. The more wisdom, sometimes too much wisdom, can go against the objective of the wisdom. It can make someone think something that's opposite of wise. It can allow someone to come away with a conclusion that is foolish and not wise. Okay, so again, we try to limit the light to the vessel. Too much light for the vessel could cause damage. The same thing is true with any situation, whether we're talking about wisdom, whether we're talking about light, or whether we're talking about even pouring something into your cup, right? So if you're at a restaurant and the waiter comes by and pours you a glass of wine, so wine is, let's say you want that glass of wine, great, but if the waiter keeps on pouring to the point that it spills over and then gets on the table, gets on your plate, gets into your food, and gets on your clothing, then you're probably going to say, stop. What are you doing? That's not okay. I like wine, but in the glass, not. Now, I say that with a massive disclaimer that if you've ever seen a Chabadnik make Kiddush, right, recite Kiddush, you know the Chabadniks are notorious for pouring the wine to the point that it's overflowing. So I know that as I'm kind of mocking, or not mocking, but kind of chiding the overflowing, I overflow. As a Chabadnik, I overflow. But only we overflow, but then at a certain point we stop. I'm not still pouring from Friday night, the Kiddush, you should know. I'm not still like with my other hand, still pouring. At some point you stop, because the point is to overflow. We want overflowing blessings, but even the overflowing blessings, that comes with a limit. But anyway, at a restaurant, unless you're making Kiddush at a restaurant, which, to each their own, you probably want it inside the glass, and just so much, even though, they're charging you for the glass, you want it full, but not too much. I had this experience with my kids, with the Slurpees. You know Slurpees, right? The frozen. Okay, in Florida, they have 7-Eleven with the original Slurpee. And then in Georgia, no 7-Elevens for some reason. Some sort of turf war. I once looked it up inside an interesting YouTube video, but let's leave that aside. But there is QT, and you can get a Frizoni. All right, a Frizoni. Whatever. Out west, I'm sure there's other things. Whatever. Here's the deal. Sometimes, the kids will take... I have some of the kids around me right now. Hey guys. Sometimes the kids will take the old Frizonis. You put the cap on, the dome cap, right? With the hole for the thing. You crank it up. Are you with me? Everyone with me so far? Yes? Okay. Crank it up. But then you're getting, treated to a Slurpee. You want to kind of fill it up. So you fill it up. But what happens? Carbon dioxide, right? What happens is, I even have kids going like that with me now. Yeah. What happens is, shortly thereafter, they filled it up full. In the dome, it's full up to the top where that spout thing is, where the hole is. Fantastic. Then they go to get the straw, the whole deal. Next thing you know, there's a volcano. Who knew that was going to be a Diet Coke with Alka-Seltzer thing, volcano, if that was, a Mentos, was it? Mento. There you go. Got my science experts here. Right? Who knew it was going to be the next thing you know, it was going to be a volcano, a Slurpee volcano, all over the floor. And then it's sorry, we went too far. The point is, too much of a good thing is sometimes simply that, too much of a good thing. So the same thing is true, the Kabbalists say, with the original, with the reason behind the original darkness. Original darkness. Why original darkness? Because what precedes that? What precedes creation? Original darkness happens at the beginning of creation. What precedes creation? God. So let's take a half step back. Make sure we're all on the same page here before I assume anything. Before creation, what I like to call BC, before creation, what is? Only God. Only God exists. Nothing else. In the language of our sages, we're going to have it inside our text that we're going to read in a moment. It's only God and His name. It's only God and His light. It's only God and His being. Only God, no other, nothing else. It's just God. Now, why do we say that it's God and His light or God and His name? That's really another conversation. I don't mind wading into it for a little bit. What it means is that God was manifest. What is a name? So what is light? Light evokes revelation and manifestation, presence, being. So when you're hidden, that's like a state of darkness. When you're open, when you're manifest, when you're present, that's a state of light and revelation. So God's light means that God not only existed, but God was manifest. Not to anyone else, but just God was present. Then a name is also the same idea. I just want to focus for just a quick moment on name, and then I'm going to get back to the story of the darkness. Why darkness is needed. So a name is a handle, a verbal handle that each one of us has that allows others to call us and recognize us, right? So it allows others to relate to us. It's how we are revealed or known to others. So us alone, we wouldn't necessarily need a name, but when there are others around, so then they need to contact us or call us or whatever, refer to us. So a name is necessary or a name is helpful for the interaction of us with others. So the truth is, one would say then God doesn't need a name before existence exists, before anything else exists. Nonetheless, God's name is more of a presence and a revelation, even for Himself, before the world exists. At a certain point in time, or before time, at a certain state, God desires to create another. Why that? That itself is a subject of much Kabbalistic discussion. One of the answers given is that God wanted a relationship. You can't have a relationship with yourself. I mean, it's not the same. So a relationship with an other, a real relationship requires an other that can truly choose that relationship. Look, if you create a program, if you create a robot, and you program it to love you, it's not a relationship. It's a robot. I mean, it's, sometimes we take what we can get, but it's not the real deal. It's not the same thing. Another human being who could choose anything and anyone, who chooses us, that feels good. That's a relationship. So a relationship by definition is when there's an other that's autonomous and still chooses, that's a relationship. Right? And we too autonomously choose them, they choose us. Now it's a relationship. That's the definition of a relationship. God, the Kabbalists say, I'm just straight up sharing with you what Kabbalah says. one of the explanations behind creation, God desired a relationship. God wanted a relationship. You can't have a relationship with yourself. I mean, it's not a, at least in this definition, it's not a relationship. God wanted a relationship, and that's it. So God created an other. But when you create an other, God created an other that is finite, that is limited, that is self-aware, that has free choice, the ability to choose to be in the relationship or to choose to find something else to be excited about. We human beings could either be excited about being in a relationship with God, or we can be excited about NASCAR. It's our choice. Why did I pick on NASCAR? Who knows? Because we're going in circles. Kidding. Because it could be anything, right? But you and I could choose. I know we're in the South. No dissing NASCAR here. NASCAR is great. No, it's only one direction. By the way, it's intense. Okay, getting back. So here's the point. God created self-contained, autonomous, free-thinking, free-willed creatures. That's us, with the hope that we will choose God, amongst other things. Not the only thing that we think of, but amongst other things that we should choose God. That would feel good to God. That's what God shows. God wants a relationship with us. If it sounds like I'm humanizing God, my apologies, but I'm just sharing with you what Kabbalah says. So, for human beings to exist, for anything else to exist that's not God, it requires cutting the infinite light. God's presence is infinite. For anything else that's finite to exist, you have to cut the light. And cutting the light requires what we call tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means a contraction, a concealment, a removal, a withdrawal. It's all of the above. It means taking the infinite light and moving it away, swiping it away, clearing it out to then have a finite space. Before creation, BC, it was just God. Infinite God, nothing else. When God chose, for only reasons known to Him and the reasons that I shared with you before based on Kabbalah, when God decided to create a world, a finite universe, a finite reality, God cut the light. God filtered, God reduced the light. This is the state of darkness. The first thing that happens in the process of creation is not manifestation, it's not revelation, it's on the contrary, it's darkness. Are you with me? When you start off in a state of infinite light, the first step to produce finite reality is darkness. This is why the Torah begins with an account of the darkness. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, the world was desolate. And it was absolutely desolate. And there was darkness. And then God said, let there be light. First, Bereisha Chashaycha V'Hadar Nahira. First, darkness, and then the light. The Talmud says it, Kabbalah says it, the Torah says it, and in our experience, it's the same way. To give you an example, we gave this example a few weeks ago. This is one of the favorite examples of Kabbalah to explain this concept. Is the example of a teacher and a student. A teacher has all of these amazing things that they want to share with the student. Imagine a brilliant teacher, a brilliant scientific mind teaching elementary school. Right? Teaching young children the basics of science. The teacher has all of these incredible, brilliant, wise ideas to share. But the children, the students are not yet ready. The students are still starting to learn science. If the teacher were to teach on his or her level, it would be a disaster. The first thing the teacher has to do is darkness, is cut the light. The first step is screen and filter and contract and eliminate, not totally eliminate, but at least push away all of the brilliance, and then ask the question, what can I deliver to this student? What can they handle? What can they receive? This is what we call having the makabel, having the recipient in mind. When we have the recipient in mind, then we cut the light. If we just have our own ego in mind, then we want to show how much we know, and then it doesn't get to the student. So the key to teaching is to, number one, care about the student, to know and understand your student and what they know, what they don't know, what they're capable of knowing, and then to work with them to develop their knowledge and to help them become learners and grow their own minds. That's the key to teaching. So the key to teaching is getting down inside the head of your student and then helping them develop their own mind. That's the key. But what's the first step? The first step is, it's not about you. It's cutting your light. It's cutting your ideas. When I say cut, I mean filter, screen, put a curtain over it, put a drape over it, move it away, move it to the side. Whatever analogy, whatever image you want to use, it's all of the above. This is what we call tzimtzum. This is what we call the idea of the language of Kabbalah. Hold on, let me take a look quickly, because we quote this from the original sources in today's chapter, which is chapter 27. Nestalic. All right. Tzimtzum, tzamtzim. Contraction and removing the light to the side. So the first step, so here's the point. Before creation, before the notion of creation, there's only light. But the moment that creation becomes something on the table, the first step for that is darkness, which means that in our perception, because we are creative beings, we can't go outside of our own realm. You with me on that? We can't transcend our own space. In our space, what's the first thing? If you were to go back, what's our first origins? Darkness. Are you with me? Our first origins are darkness. I hope I've developed this point enough where that makes sense what I just said. If you go back to the original, right? The original origins, it's light, because it begins with God and God's infinite light. But our origins, from the moment God decides to create, there's a tzimtzum, there's a contraction, there's a necessary cutting of the light, screening of the light, curtaining the light. That's the darkness. That's our first emergence. So we begin our origins from our perspective, looking all the way back and up. It's darkness. That's where the Torah begins. The Torah tells us about creation. It also alludes to what happened before, but it's telling us about the process of creation. The first step is Vayihi Erev. There was evening. And then there was Boker. Then there was morning, day one. In other words, first darkness, then light. And that's why in our lives, the same process works. To get the breakthrough, to get the light, we go through the darkness. Not just because it follows the pattern of creation, but because to truly get the breakthrough that we want. If the breakthrough is truly infinite, then the first emergence into our reality is, it has to be cut and screened. Are you with me on what I just said? If the light is truly worthy of the description light, then in order for it to emerge into our consciousness, into our reality, the first state of emergence has to be a state of darkness. It cannot emerge as light. If it emerged as light, it would be too profound for us. It first has to emerge as darkness, and only then, through our efforts and uncovering, can it emerge then secondarily as light, as the light that it truly is. Does that make sense what I just said? Yes? If you're dealing with finite, then you don't need to cut anything. But if we're dealing with infinite light, then it has to start in a state of darkness and only afterwards be developed. And to give you the example of what it means to develop it, it's like a student. Think about you and I. Think about the wisdom that we have. Whatever age or stage you are in your life, think about your wisdom. And then think about when you were 5 years old. Did you have the wisdom that you had at 5 that you have now? The answer is probably not. Right? You have more wisdom now than you had at 5 years old. Right? That's the reality. But at 5 years old, but when did you learn all this wisdom? It started when you were young. And then it built and built and built and built. And that's the process of uncovering, unpacking, developing, working with all of the stuff, all of the seeds that were planted, all of the tzimtzums, all the darkness transmissions, all of the ideas that were given to you and I in a packaged way. We eventually, as we go through life, when we mature, we unpack them and we get to the true light, the true brilliant light. Same thing is true in our lives. For the greatest blessings to emerge, the Kabbalists say, they first emerge as darkness and then light. The greatest blessings are the ones that seem to be curses in the beginning. The greatest blessings originate as, quote, curses. The greatest opportunities begin as challenges, not just because that's God's system and that's the world we're stuck in, but because conceptually, to really have the breakthrough, to really have the success, really have the achievement, the light has to be cut first and only then developed. It has to be cut, it has to be screened, it has to be diminished. That's why, for example, we teach with parables. What's a parable? There's a concept you want to teach, but you can't just teach the concepts. You put it into a story. And then you give the student the story. And then the story, they can unpack it and understand the lesson, the life lesson from the story. So the first thing that you give them is something that you don't want to, something that's off the track of what you actually want to tell them. Not totally off the track, but it's indirect, right? You're presenting them with something that's obscure. Why? Because the student can take the story but can't take the pure theory. So you first give the story, which is the hidden version of the idea, and then they unpack it. I hope that makes sense. All right, questions or comments thus far on what I said? Anybody, everybody, jump in. Joy, it looked like you were about to jump in with something. No? Okay. If I was, yeah.
Parables.
Good, yeah. Stories and parables are a powerful way of teaching. But understand the concept. Is you're trying to deliver an idea, but instead of saying it straight, you're telling a story. So it's like the darkness. Now, a story is good, and it's fun, and it's exciting, and I understand it's not what we typically think as darkness. But relative to the idea, to the pure concept, it's the darkness, not the light. But yet, that's how we do it. Present the story first, and then we unpack it from there. First darkness, then light. It's the necessary process. Let's do this inside. And as we go through this, I want you to keep in mind this very important idea. That we are trying to chart how things originate and emerge from a state of darkness to a state of light, and then from a state of light back to a state of darkness. There's a progression. If you recall, when it came to Chachma and Bina, which was our topic of our conversation the last several weeks, we have like the original flash of insight of Chachma, which is still hidden. Even the person that has the Chachma insight, the light bulb goes off, doesn't have clarity on the concept. It's still kind of vague. So that's the first emergence is in a state of darkness, even though we kind of symbolize it with the lightning flash and a light bulb going off. But at that stage, relative to full understanding, it's considered to be dark and opaque. It's not fully understood, so it's darkness. And then it's developed into a revealed state in Bina. And then from Bina, we summarize it back into that kind of concealed state of Chachma. We said that last week and the week before. We've said it the last few weeks. We have this progression of darkness to light and then back to darkness. And so what we're doing today is also charting that in the origins of existence. How first there's darkness, the tzimtzum, and then light, and then darkness again. Okay, let me share my screen with you, and let's do some text inside. Let's actually study from the holy words as they are written. Maybe we're on page 70, maybe we're not. That was my guess. Let's see. Almost. This is chapter 27, page 75. Okay, here we go. Remember, if you have a question or clarification at any point, please unmute yourself and jump right in. Okay, in order to better understand this matter, what matter? The matter we've been speaking about, the idea of Chachma and Bina, and how Chachma and Bina, although they're very different, how they work together, notwithstanding their differences. So in order to better understand this matter, we must first explain concealment and revelation in the context of their original source. In other words, what is the original state of concealment and what is the original state of revelation in the universe? Forget in the person's mind. We've been speaking about in a person's mind. Chachma and Bina, concealment, revelation. You don't understand the idea yet, then you do understand it, and then you summarize it again. That's in the head. But where does it exist in the universe? Here we go. Our sages declared, and you might be familiar with this quote now, because I've said it a bunch of times and wrote it in the email. Our sages declared in Tractate Shabbat, in the beginning of the world's creation, there was first darkness and then light. There too was darkness and light, concealment and revelation. In other words, in the beginning of the universe, first you had darkness and then light. And there too, he says, was there unification. What does it mean? What does it mean, unification? They work together. Although darkness and light are very different states of being, contradictory, opposite states of being, they work together in unison. How does that work? Look at the end of right over here, this part of the, you can highlight it. Light and revelation comes out of darkness and concealment concealment comes out of revelation. Right? So you have first darkness and concealment, which then evolves into light and revelation evolves back into concealment. I'm going to stop sharing with you and make this very simple in human terms. Or in what happens at night, it's dark, and then it gets light, and then it gets dark. Are you with me in the pattern? Yes, right? Sunset, sunrise, sunset. That's how it is from the beginning. And that's specifically the process that it's not first light, it's not sunrise, sunset, sunrise. No, it's sunset, sunrise, sunset. That's how it works. That's how it works from the beginning. Kabbalistically, first concealment, then light, then concealment again. I'm going to share my screen with you as we continue on studying the Kabbalah. He quotes here Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim, just so you know, was written by Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was the primary student of the Arizal. So what we're learning right now is Lurianic Kabbalah. So the teaching of the Eitz Chaim on this matter is well known. It is really well known, this teaching. Here we go. And what is the teaching? Let me highlight it for you. Before the first tzimtzum, contraction and concealment of the infinite light, also referred to as the vacant space, makam panoi, the Ein Sof light filled all space. Nothing existed other than the revelation of the infinite Ein Sof light. So again, he's painting the picture. Eitz Chaim, actually, this book of Kabbalah, paints the picture of what reality looked like before the world was created. And what did it look like? All that existed was this right here. Ein Sof light. Ein Sof, by the way, means infinite. The infinite light filling all space. That's all there was. Nothing existed other than the revelation of the infinite Ein Sof light. Honestly, that's redundant. Infinite Ein Sof. Ein Sof means infinite. So the editors put it in brackets, maybe just to translate it, but it's a little bit redundant. All that existed is God's revelation, God's being, God's reality. Concerning this, back inside, concerning this it is stated, and this is stated in the Midrash Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. It says, before the world was created, there was only Him and His name. Remember I told you this before? Him and His name. Name is always the part of us that is available, that is revealed for others. But in this context, it means God's revelation. Not to an other in that context, but just revealed. And likewise, it also says, this is from our prayers, you are holy and your name is holy. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh. It's in the Amidah, every single Amidah throughout the year we say that phrase. So too, another phrase from our prayers, you are one and your name is one. Ata echad v'shimcha echad. You are one and your name is one. The name, quote name, refers to the level of Malchut, kingship of Ein Sof, also called Shemo HaGadol and Shemei Rabbah, the great name, which is truly included in God's absolute essence. So there's a lot of Kabbalah right here, and I want to expand on it and explain it and make sure that it's understandable before we move on. Before creation, before even the notion of creation, God exists. And how does God exist? And what does God look like? That we don't know. All we know is that God existed. God exists. God is. God is true reality and true being. And the way we refer to it in Kabbalah is the idea of Ein Sof light, infinite light, that fills all the space. There's nothing else, right? There's no other, there's no universe, there's no me, there's no you, there's only God. So God is taking up all the space that could ever be. God is filling all that space perfectly and wholly and completely. But the way the Kabbalists describe it, and the way it's described really in our prayers also outside of Kabbalah, in classic Jewish language, we talk about God and His name. God and His name. What's name? So name is a euphemism for the level of Malchut, which is the lowest of the 10 attributes, the 10 Sfirot. But in this context, it's not the 10 Sfirot of creation, let's say of the world of Atzilut, because the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation, is a world that already exists post-Tzimtzum, in other words, once the world is created. And we're talking here about before creation. We're talking about God's reality before creation. So what we're saying is before creation, there was also a notion, a very subtle notion of 10 Sfirot, of 10 divine energies, including the lowest, which is Malchut. And it's of this level that we say that God and His name was one. It's referring to the level of Malchut of Ein Sof, the infinite level of Malchut, the Malchut of the infinite light. So the bottom line is it's God and His infinite light with His Sfirot, and it's just pure God. God is hanging out in the space that will eventually become the universe. That's how everything, that's before the beginning. That's the original state. That's not the beginning of creation. That's before creation. Let's continue. All of this is in Eitz Chaim. All of this is straight up Eitz Chaim, the teachings of the Arizal, the great Kabbalist of Safed from the 1500s. Next, afterwards. What happened next? Afterwards, which means when God decided to create, He contracted Himself. And that word contracted, that's tzamtzem or tzimtzum. Contraction means that instead of taking up all the space, you shrink down into a single space. Retracting the first, I would call it original, the original light totally, and submerging it within the essential being of the Ein Sof. So instead of God's presence spreading out, God in essence contracted into Himself. Now there's no way for you and I to understand this. There's no way for you and I to truly get this. So we're going to have to use some language that gives us some inkling, some sort of, very crude understanding on some level. The best way I can depict it for us is the following. Imagine a room, a vacant room. Okay, so picture a vacant room with a single light bulb. With a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. No shade, no fixture or whatever, no lampshade. Just a single light bulb. Now I'm picturing an interrogation room, but I don't want it to have any negative connotation. Just straight up a light bulb hanging down from the room, from the ceiling. And the light's on, and but there are no windows. It's filling this room with light. Right? So the light bulb is the source of the light at this point, and it's filling the room. The whole room now is lit. Imagine, I know it's impossible. I'm going to ask you to imagine something like science fiction. But that's the only way we're going to be able to picture this. Imagine if the light, you ready for this? If the light were to reverse spread. Are you with me? And instead of emanating out from the light bulb into the room, imagine if you could see with your eyes, and if you could hit a button and you could see the light gather from around the room and go back into the light bulb and be contained into that light bulb, but not emanate outside the light bulb. Are you with me? Now that's impossible, correct? Yes? I mean, obviously it's impossible, because that's not how it works. When you have a light bulb and the light bulb's on, the light shines. I'm asking you to suspend reality for a moment, or our reality, what we know of reality, and imagine if, like a black hole, maybe. I don't know enough about black holes to know, is that what a black hole does? It sucks everything in, all the light in. David.
Yes. All matter, all energy gets sucked in.
There you go. Done. So imagine a black hole. Now that would sound kind of dangerous if you're in the room, but imagine if you could hit, you know the light switch on and off? Imagine if when you turned it on, the light spread out. When you turned it off, it didn't cut the electricity. Imagine if somehow magically all the light in the room just was sucked back into the light bulb. The light bulb itself had the light, but it was so self-contained. Again, somehow it was so self-contained that the space around it was dark, devoid of the light. Are you with me on that? On that imagination? Okay. That's the first tzimtzum. That, in essence, is how the Kabbalists describe tzimtzum harishon, the first tzimtzum. Shabbat lamp. I love it. Sandrine, I'm loving that. It's like the shabulb. Yeah, it's like the shabulb that has the little... I wonder if we can get that unscrewed and brought here. Hold on one second. I'm going to... Mendel! Sorry. Mendel! No? No, you can see the thing. I don't think that. Sorry. All right. Imagine if you could hit a switch and all the light gets sucked back into the source. So the source is not changed. Are you with me on this? It's very important. The source doesn't change. The source was light and it still is light. The only difference is the appearance to the outside, so to speak, or the level to which the light is spreading everywhere. So originally, if you will, the light was on and spread, then you hit another switch and it went back into... Oh, is it hot? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Ooh, it is very hot. This is called, guys, this is it. This is the future of light. Well, all right, I'll let you decide. This is called the shabulb. It even has an OU on it. OU is like the kosher symbol? Yes? Are you with me in what's going on here? Yes? A kosher, this is the kosher shabulb. Why the shabulb? So you plug it, you use this light bulb on Shabbat. You can get it on Amazon or whatever, Judaica store, Judaica corner locally. You put it in, your light fixture, and then on Shabbat, you can turn it on and off without cutting electricity. This has an extra, can you see that? This guy? You just move it this way and that way, and internally, there's like a cover, I guess. Oh, no, I know what it is. It's, I don't want to unscrew it. I don't want to break it. Basically, it's an LED bulb. It's an LED bulb. So it's got like different LED diodes or whatever it's called. And it has like, and when it's in one position, they're open. Another position just moves a piece of plastic or something over it to cover the light, and the light doesn't spread. So you can read. You can have the light on in your room. Let's say your lamp by your bed, and you can read. Let's say Friday night you want to read something before you go to sleep. Instead of turning off your light on Shabbat, which we try to avoid, all you do is this, and therefore you're not messing with electricity, but you now have a dark room. Does that make sense? All right. Shabab, l'chaim. Anyway, the point is like this. The point is, imagine if you could hit a switch and all the light pours back into the source. That's essentially what happens with a tzimtzum harishon. That's the way the Eitz Chaim, that's the way Reb Chaim Vital, based on the teachings of the Arizal, that's the way he describes the first step of creation. Because up until then, God's presence is filling the entirety of possible space. There's no room for other. Right? You want to have a relationship with another, there's no space. What other? Where? Where are you going to put another? There's only God and His light everywhere. So what's the first step? Is the withdrawal. Is the contraction. It's taking the light that's spread out and drawing it back into its essence state, which now gives a lot of room. A lot of room. It's almost like in a conversation. You're at a party and you're talking. If you want to learn about the other person, you got to stop talking, because that withdrawal gives space for someone else to get a word in, right? If we're only doing the projecting, then there's no space for the other. So it's in the space that's born of the withdrawal that the other emerges. Okay, let me share my screen with you again, and let's get back inside the text because it's really beautiful. So here we go. So again, so this is the tzimtzum. Let me just highlight some words here. This is the tzimtzum, the contraction and concealment of the infinite light, and it creates the vacant space, the makam panoi. Very important. God's light never changed. Very important. God's light, God never changed. God doesn't change. When the light goes back into the light bulb doesn't change. The only difference is instead of it being seen elsewhere, now it's not. Same thing with God. God's light was originally everywhere, and now it's back just inside himself. God doesn't change. God is still light, and God is still infinite. Next. So originally it was everywhere. Afterwards, he contracted himself, retracting the first light, the original light, totally, and submerging it within the essential being of the Ein Sof. All that remained, here we go, all that remained, this is very important, was a trace called the Rishimu, the trace of the original light. One solitary point like the point of a Yud. In other words, all that looks, when you look out at the space now, it's darkness. You don't see the divine light. But if you look really closely, if you look at the spiritual forensics, right? If you put on the UV light or the blue light, whatever it is, I don't know, whatever light it is, where you can see stuff, right? You put on a certain light, you can see, I see a little bit of a residue like a little yud, like a little smudge from the original light, a little trace of the original light that remains behind in that space of darkness. This point included within itself all that could possibly be revealed in the order of Hishtalshalut, the progressively descending levels of existence. What he says here is, God withdrew his light from the space. All that remains is the darkness, but there also remains a trace of the light, and it's from that trace of light that creation that the other emerges. Other requires a duality or a paradox. In order for there to be an other, there has to be space, but there also has to be energy, there also has to be light, because if you just have empty space, you still don't have an other. Within the empty space, you have to have something, not just the absence of, you have to have the presence of to have the other. So you have God removed his light, that's the absence of, but where's the presence of? That's the residue. That's the residue of the light that he says is like the point of a yud. And only this point remains after the tzimtzum because the worlds cannot receive the original light. As long as the original light was there, you couldn't have an other. It was too much light, too infinite to have a finite reality of the worlds. So God therefore contracted and concealed the light within himself, and there remained only the point, the merest, the slightest glimmer, which could then be developed and revealed. Are you with me so far? Yeah. He gives the example again of teaching. That's why I mentioned it before. We've mentioned it previously. We mentioned it earlier today. The aforementioned analogy of a mashpia, a transmitter, a teacher, and a makabel, a recipient, is very pertinent here. In other words, let's cite once again the example of a teacher and a student. And the way he calls a teacher and student is mashpia, that means the influencer, and the makabel means the one who's being influenced or taught. Because the essential light of the mashpia, the teacher, cannot be assimilated by the makabel, by the recipient, assuming that it's too big to handle, he has to conceal the depth of his wisdom within himself. So the teacher, let's talk about Einstein. Albert Einstein, is teaching 5th grade science. Wow, can you imagine Einstein teaching a 5th grader? Blow their minds. But that's not going to work. If the objective is to blow their minds, he could do that without thinking. But if the objective is to teach, then look what he has to do. He has to conceal the depth of his wisdom within himself. He has to take all of the wisdom and hug it tightly, keep it inside. Are you with me? Don't share it, Albert. Al, do not reveal that. Hold it back. Hold yourself back. Constrain yourself. Conceal yourself. Don't start getting into E equals MC squared. They're 5th graders. Take it easy. Start slow. He has to conceal the wisdom. It's not infinite, but it's relative to the student. It's much greater. He has to conceal it within himself. there remains only a simple point, that which can be revealed to and assimilated by the Makabal. So when he's creating his lesson plan, he has to take all of the brilliance and hold it inside, and what's left is only a little bit of his brilliance that could be understood, that could be accepted by the recipient. In a similar way, this is true of all teachers. Every single teacher has to go through the process of checking down, what am I teaching, how am I teaching it, how are they going to understand it, what examples am I going to use, what's my process, what's the objective. There's so many questions that a teacher has to ask before teaching, and they're all about how will I ensure, or how can I help the student understand what I'm saying. Without the thinking, the teacher just teaches, just throws information, and goes right over the student's head. So in any situation of giver and receiver, there has to be a cutting of the light, a shielding, a dimming, a lessening, a withdrawal of the light. What remains is only a little bit, and that little bit is then delivered to the student. Similarly, let's get back now to the analog, which is God and creation. When the essential supernal light was concealed, when God's original light was concealed, when God's light was revealed, you couldn't have a world. So then the first step is darkness. When the essential light of God was concealed, there then remained only the residual point, that which could relate to the world. So God, once again, to explain, God removes the light that's filling all space. God withdraws it. God moves it inside. What remains is empty space. Good, that's a start. But within the empty space, there's a residual point of light from that original light, and it's from that residue that's limited, that's concealed, that's smaller, that's not as infinite as it once was. It's from there that creation can emerge in a positive sense. Reva, you want to say hi? No. Okay. Fine. We all say hi to you. How about that? However, here we go. However, this is post-Tzimtzum. However, because this point, the residual point, the residue, because this point is still in a state of concealment, right? So not only was the big infinite light concealed, even the residue is only in a state of a point, which is a concealment state. Therefore, there still must be drawn from it the kav, line, or chut, thread, a revelation of light. Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to share a whiteboard with you, and I'm going to draw this. And in drawing it, I'm like bordering on blasphemy, because who am I to draw, divine revelation? What does that even mean? Nonetheless, I'm gonna attempt to depict in imagery, in my crude attempt at drawing. I'm going to try to attempt to portray what we're talking about here. We start off with the infinite light, and I'm going to depict this. Well, that's a very not great depiction. Hold on, let me erase this. Actually, let me just undo it. Draw. How do we get different color? Let's do orange. Okay. Now, if you notice, this looks uncannily like the sun, because that's in our human experience the closest thing that we know to source of light and emanation of light is the sun, which is the source of the light of our planet, and it's a thing that emanates its light outside of itself. So this is the depiction that I'm going to use for the infinite light before creation. There's God, and then there's the light, and it's spreading everywhere. Now what happens with the Tzimtzum? What happens is all the light goes back inside, right? That's why I'm drawing the arrows. The light is now going back inside, and the light's now going back inside the original space. So now you have right? So now if I were to clear this, you would have kind of, I'm just depicting a landscape here, little crooked landscape, I might add. And you have, right, some sort of source, but instead of the light filling everything, it's now self-contained. Self-contained. And the rest is empty space. And I need to emphasize, once again, this is not in any way trying to picture or depict or draw God, because that would be, we don't do that. But this is just a depiction of a concept, trying to depict a concept of what emanation looks like, or what emanation is, or what withdrawal is, and all that stuff. So again, this is a crude attempt at putting something in visual in front of our eyes, just so we can have some sort of understanding of the concept. So the light, instead of going out, it goes within. But the key point that he says is now you have all this dark space. So if we were to kind of depict it here, you would have like all this dark space, right? That's around it. Well, wonderful. The dark space is still not a creation. It's still not something other. So he says no. Within the dark space, because the light had filled that space, so therefore within the dark space there's a residue of the original light, and there are traces. You have small traces of the original light. So I'm trying to draw dots, right? Dots of the original light that are still there. But he says not dots, he actually uses the word dot. A nakuda, one dot, like a yud, like a single yud. So if you were to like zoom in, I don't know if I could zoom in, I don't know if we could zoom in on this picture, which I don't think we can, and like isolate one dot, that would be like our token residue of light. And what he says here is that what happens is that from, again, just drawing the landscape, if you will, from the single dot that remains, and there should be a point there that you can see, right? That's the point. Well, whatever. That's near the point. That point then expands into a kav and a chut, meaning there's expansion from the point into something that has a little bit more breadth and depth and width. So it expands, and it's from there that creation emerges in a positive way. So we have multiple steps to this. In the beginning, before the beginning, there's only God and His light filling all space. Then there's a withdrawal. There's a tzimtzum. There's a contraction. The light goes within. What's left is empty space, but not 100%. There's still a residue. There's still a point of light. And that point then, from that point, there's expansion. And from that expansion comes creation, what we call Seder Hishtalshalut, the order of creation of the worlds that we know and love. Okay, again, this is a very crude depiction of the topic at hand. Does that make sense? What we just discussed? Go, Toba. You got to unmute yourself.
I'm not sure about the expansion from the point of light.
Okay.
There are all these points of light. So is each point of light expanding, and what is being created? Like, is the whole world being created from all those points of light, from one point of light?
One point of light. One point of light. I just drew multiple points in my original drawing. Well, in my drawing like a few moments ago, just because the point of light is not necessarily isolated in one space. It's a point of light that is one point that could be everywhere, because it's not subject necessarily to the same constrictions of space that we're thinking of. But it's still one point. It's still kind of like the light in summary form in one point. Where is it? I'll give you an example. Let's say you read a paper. Let's say you read an essay that is 50 pages long. And then you have like one line that summarizes it, right? So where's the summary?
At the end?
No, but the summary is a concept. I'm saying, where's the concept? So the concept doesn't exist in space. It just is a summary. It's not like the concept exists, on page 50 and not on page 1. A summary is a summary, right? It's a point that includes everything that is everywhere, but it's only still a point. So that's what I'm saying. The point of the residue that remains after the tzimtzum is not necessarily isolated in a certain space, but it is isolated as a single point, if that makes sense. It's a single point, but not necessarily in a single space. So where it expands is really everywhere, right? But it expands in the state of expansion, not to more places, but to a different state of unfolding, from point to line. Where? everywhere, because the point is everywhere.
I was confused because you had a lot of points of light in your drawing.
Yeah, that was me trying to throw everybody off the trail. I'm joking. Okay, so again, I mean, we're talking about, I mean, this is like straight up, this is pure Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Luria Luriana Kabbalah. This is straight Kabbalah from 500 years ago, based on ancient teachings, obviously, but this is like as described, this is straight up. So we have the infinite light, we have the contraction, we have the residue. From the residue, there's expansion, and that is creation. Right? That's how the process works. So it's so let's get back. So let me share my screen again. Let's get back inside the text. Here we go. Actually, let me start from the beginning here. However, because this point is still in a state of concealment, even the residue that remains is concealed. There still must be drawn from it the kav, line, or chut, thread, or revelation of light. In other words, it has to be expanded into, it has to be developed into something for there to be something. Otherwise, it's still just a point or a residue. Okay, so what is the first stage of development? The first stage of its enclothement was or is in the state that's called Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon means primordial man. Adam means man, not gender specific, but it means like human. Kadmon means primordial, like original. Adam Kadmon is an original state of being, the original state of being of creation. So, before creation, infinite light. God withdraws it. Residue, still a point, drawn out as a line, the first expansion, the first emanation, the first thing that's produced, we call Adam Kadmon, which was the first existence created through the kav, through the line. So infinite light turns into darkness, turns into point, turns into line, turns into Adam Kadmon. I hope all of this makes sense. Adam Kadmon, by the way, in Kabbalah, is referred to usually with its acronym. You take the first two letters, the first letter of each of these two words, Aleph or A and K, it's known as Ak. Ak. Ayin Kuf. Aleph Kuf, Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon, Ak. Okay? That's just in Kabbalistic circles. If you talk about Ak, you're in the know. You're referring to Adam Kadmon. Okay, this level is called, Adam Kadmon is called an area. An area. It's a shetach, it's a space of expression of light. It's the first emergence of somethingness, and is referred to as Tehiru Ilah, the supernal purity, which follows the Tzimtzum. It's like the first, most gentlest, feather of existence. Feather, I'm trying to depict something light and, almost non-existent but existent. It's like the feather, light, something that emerges after the tzimtzum, after the withdrawal of the original infinite light. Of this it says, and this is coming from, 150, let's see the source of this quote. This is coming from Zohar, okay? Coming from Zohar, one of the more original Kabbalistic works. Of this it is said, here we go, he carved an engraving in Tehiru Ilah. In the original, it's Galef Galifu, but Tehiru Ilah. He carved an engraving in Tehiru Ilah. Carved an engraving, though, is kind of like, you take, you're on the beach and you take your finger and you draw something into the sand. Very subtle. It's like the first emergence of something. It's not a separate thing from what you have, right? It's not like ink on paper, which are two items. There's the ink and the paper, and they're two separate things. This is like within the thing itself. It's being engraved or carved or drawn. It's trying to evoke something very subtle, the first subtlety, created subtlety. The entire, continues to say, the entire ishtalshalut, which means the entire schematic of creation, from the first to the last level of existence, even to the very lowest level, our planet Earth, is all included in Adam Kadmon. This matter is discussed elsewhere. These are very, very deep and very, these concepts are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very lofty. And they can be very confusing because our minds are going to try to concretize. Everything that we learn, because we exist in a concrete reality, we're going to try to concretize all these ideas. What's Ak, and what's Tiarillah, and what's the engraving, and how does the entire Hishashlut, entire chain of creation exist within Adam Kadmon. And I did it. I did it myself. I pulled up a whiteboard and I started drawing out Tzimtzum, and drawing out, empty space, and drawing out the Nekuda, the Roshim, the residue, and drawing out the Kav and the Chut, the line that emerged. Because that's how our minds operate. We have to think, we think in concrete terms. As abstract as we are, our abstractness, our so-called abstractness, is still within the boundaries of what we know and what we perceive. It's still within the boundaries of what our experience is. Can't think outside of our experience. How does that even happen? So Kabbalah reveals a reality that's outside our experience. So it's going to be, I'm just affirming, if you find these concepts very hard to understand, to wrap your mind around, it should be like that. Because these are things that exist outside of our experience. We don't live with this on a daily basis. It's not something that we know from the inside out. These are forces that preceded us. Okay, but again, if we had to chart all the stages, originally we have the infinite light, then we have the contraction and the empty space, but then we have the residue, which is still a point, and then it's drawn into a kav, which then develops into Adam Kadmon, and that becomes the nucleus, if you will, of the entire creation that will evolve from that space. People ask me, does Kabbalah believe in creation or evolution? The answer is both. Not evolution, I'm not commenting on Darwin's evolution, that's something else. I'm commenting on the essential concept of evolution Kabbalah absolutely speaks of, right? All of this is evolutionary. All of this happens with an unfolding process, right? The light is withdrawn, there's a residue, it turns from point to line, and then Adam Kadmon, and that is the nucleus. Look what he says. The entire Hishashlut, all of existence, from top to bottom, is included in Adam Kadmon. And then so what happens? It evolves, it emerges, it unfolds from that original state, from that original nucleus, it unfolds like an embryo that evolves into a fetus, that then evolves into a living human being. There's an evolution there. So, does it happen all at once? Creation or evolution? The answer is both, right? There's a beginning, there's an absolute beginning, which we would call the tzimtzum, the contraction, that kind of starts it off. But then it unfolds. Even the tzimtzum unfolds in a certain sense. Okay, let's continue. We find, therefore, that there are two types of light. The first is the original light, which preceded the tzimtzum. That's the infinite light. When the Ein Sof light, the infinite light, filled all of space. So that's the first light. The second is the light of the Kav after the Tzimtzum. That's the line that comes from the point after the Tzimtzum. The first light was the original revelation which shone forth from the Ein Sof. This is the light which was then contracted and concealed, leaving only a point which was still concealed, and finally, out of the concealment of the point, came the revelation of the light of the Kav. The Kav means the line, and from the line comes Ak, comes creation. This being so, we have here a paradox, he says. And by the way, always look for the paradoxes. That's where the magic lies. On the one hand, the first revelation of the Ein Sof light gives rise to the concealment, which constitutes the first Tzimtzum. Indeed, even the point that remains is also concealed and utterly lacking in expansion. On the other hand, the concealment of the point gives rise to the light of the Kav Chut. So look what he says here. There's a paradox. The light leads to Tzimtzum darkness, and the Tzimtzum darkness leads to light of the Kav and Chut. You see that? Light evolves into darkness. The Ein Sof light evolves, or whatever, evolves into tzimtzum, darkness, and from the tzimtzum or post-tzimtzum residue point of concealment, that evolves into light. So light rolls into darkness, and darkness rolls into light. We can accordingly interpret the text of the prayer. This is the evening prayer. Go lel ar mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei ar. He rolls away light before darkness and darkness before light, as follows. Now we can reimagine what we say in our prayers that seems to be talking about sunrise, sunset in a physical way, but now we can understand it mystically. God rolls away, I love that term, God rolls away the original Ein Sof light that preceded the Tzimtzum before the darkness and concealment of the Tzimtzum. So God rolls away the light and brings out the Tzimtzum darkness. And then conceals his light within the point. And after the darkness, he does the opposite. He then rolls away the darkness, the Tzimtzum, before the light of the Kav, which shines forth after the Tzimtzum. So first there's light, infinite light. God rolls that out, God rolls that away, and brings out the darkness, the concealment. And then God has the concealment and the point, and then God rolls that away and brings out the light of the Kav, and the emergence of creation. So what's the point of all of this? The point of all of this is that there's a process by which everything unfolds. And there's an interplay between light and darkness and light. Light leads to darkness, which leads to light again. Or, from our perspective, it's darkness which leads to light. You with me? Because we don't begin, in our consciousness, we begin from the Tzimtzum. So it's the darkness, looking up at our roof, not past it, not poking a hole through it, but looking at the top, at the origins, at the roof of our existence, we come from the darkness. And from the darkness, from the Tzimtzum, the light, the Kav, emerged. So darkness begot, whatever it is, the light, birth the light. And then from our light, the goal is to go back to the darkness, which means the truth of God's light that is way beyond what we can know, what we can imagine, which to us is the state of to us we call darkness, which is the original light. Make sense? To the best of our ability. So what's the point of all of this? The point is to show that even in the cosmic universe, even in the creation, you have the same interplay as in our minds, Chachma and Bina. Darkness, light, darkness. There's a handoff between the two different forces. The Chachma says, Bina, run with it. Bina says, I got it. Right? Passing the torch, passing the baton of this race, this marathon. And each one is helping the other. Chachma helps Bina, and Bina helps get back to Chachma. And there's a same interplay in the original source. You have light and darkness and light, and they're different realities. Polar opposite realities, but they're all working together. And translated down, drill down into our life, what it means is like this. We all have moments of challenge, but they exist only for the opportunities of light that follow. So remember this. The darkness that exists is only because there's an infinite light that's trying to be transmitted that can't come down in a straightforward fashion because it's infinite. So what has to happen? The light has to be removed. And all you have left is a residue, is a point. And that point is also concealed. And it seems dark, and it seems scary, and it seems foreboding, and it seems challenging. And it is. But remember that inside that point of darkness, inside that core of darkness, lies the greatest light that we're meant to expand like the Kav and create a new reality, a reality of the blessings that God has intended for us. The greatest infinite blessings have to come down through the shield, the opaque shield of concealment, which is the struggle. But that's the way it is. Not just because God chose it to be such, but because we couldn't receive it in a straightforward fashion. As long as the light is shining in its full brilliance, we would melt within that space. Therefore, God cuts it. It comes to us as a challenge, and then we unpack it as beauty and brilliance. The message for us, of course, tying it back into our relationship with others, is you have light and darkness. You have totally different personalities. There's still the handoff. There's still the cooperation. Light works with darkness, and darkness works with light. We need to be able to work with the other person. We need to be able to understand the other person, create healing within ourselves, and healing within our planet, and healing within all of creation. And then we will merit the infinite light, the infinite reality, the truth that we've been waiting so long to connect with, which is the truth of God, which is the idea of Mashiach. All right, thank you for joining me today for Kabbalah Coffee. Hope you enjoyed it. Today was like high level, I would say, like straight Kabbalah. This is not mixed with like creamer and sugar. This is like, the pure coffee, right? This is like the real, the full dosage. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you for the kind words. Glad that you're here. Glad that you enjoyed it. Glad that you're all here and enjoyed it. A few quick announcements. Number one, espresso, exactly. Number one, coming up in a few weeks, we have our dinner, which is going to be a real treat. We have an international cast of stars, musical performances, live musical performance from South Africa, a live talk, lecture, inspiring talk about positivity from England. And we have local entertainment, swag, and food delivered to your home. If you live in Atlanta, I can get it to you on the day of. If not, we can schmooze about, making a plan. But join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. September 10th, 6 p.m. The festivities begin. Sign up at intownjewishacademy.org/gala. Is it gala or gala? How do you pronounce it? Who can help me with the pronunciation?
Your choice.
Is it both? Is it really both? Okay, well, there you go. GALA. IntownJewishAcademy.org. And of course, it helps support and helps us continue the educational programming that we do here at Intown Jewish Academy. So that's one announcement. Tomorrow night, Gemstones and Kabbalah. Get your gemstones. And that's it. Beautiful. It's gorgeous. Don is going to teach how to make these gemstones live, followed by a conversation or intertwined with a conversation about the Kabbalah of colors and energies and personalities. And it's going to be a great combined workshop. It's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, you got the package. Oh, awesome. It hit Vegas. Love it. Fran, I'm so glad that you got it. Thank you.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you. Thank you for everything. Yasher Koach. Okay, so I'm very excited. That made my day. I meant to track it. Okay, good. So you see that, Donna? Your jewelry is now it's spreading. It's spreading. It's all across the states. We sent to California. We sent to upstate New York. We sent to Vegas, and then local. Anyway, so that's the plan. So that's tomorrow night, and otherwise, stay tuned. We have a lot of interesting stuff coming up. We have a high holiday boot camp. We have services. You can get a kit with a shofar and a honey cake. Anyway, lots of stuff. Stay tuned for more, and let's continue studying. And as we study Torah, we know that Torah is light, and that helps bring light into our lives, and peace and tranquility and purpose, a sense of meaning and a sense of really clarity amidst all of the confusion that exists out there in the world. So thank you for joining. It's great to connect in this way. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and see you all. Enjoy. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Give my best to Alex. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cold hard Kabbalah.